asked to determine if each expression is a polynomial. If it is a polynomial, categorize it as a monomial, binomial, or trinomial. A monomial is a polynomial with one term, a binomial is a polynomial with two terms, and a trinomial is a polynomial with three terms. Let's begin by reviewing the definition of a polynomial. The basic building block of a polynomial is a monomial. A monomial is one term and can be a number, a variable, or the product of a number and variables with an exponent. Here's an example of a monomial. The coefficient can be any real number including 0. The exponent of the variable must be a whole number, which means it must be 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. A monomial cannot have a variable in the denominator, under a radical, have a fractional exponent, or have a negative exponent. And finally, the value of the exponent is the degree of the monomial, and the degree of a polynomial is the degree of its highest degree term. Now going back to our example, let's analyze each expression to see if it is a polynomial. So looking at number 1, the first term has a coefficient of 5, the second term has a coefficient of 1/2, the third term has a coefficient of square root 5, all of which are real numbers. And now let's look at the exponents on the variables. Here we have an exponent of 3, and here we have an exponent of 1. Both exponents are whole numbers, and therefore number 1 is a polynomial, and because it has 3 terms, it would be categorized as a trinomial. Now looking at number 2, notice how here we have the variable y in the denominator, which means the first term is not a monomial. Looking back at our definition, a monomial cannot have a variable in the denominator, which means number 2 is not a polynomial. Now looking at number 3, the first term has a coefficient of 1/4, the second term has a coefficient of square root 2, both of which are real. And now let's look at the exponents on the variable. We have an exponent of 3 here, and an exponent of 1 here. Both of these are whole numbers, and therefore number 3 is a polynomial, and because it has 2 terms, it would be categorized as a binomial. Now looking at the terms in number 4, notice here we have the cube root of n, and therefore this first term is not a monomial. A monomial cannot have a variable under a radical, which means number 4 is not a polynomial. Looking at number 5, notice how here we have z cubed in the denominator, which means the first term is not a monomial, and therefore this is not a polynomial. Again, a monomial cannot have a variable in the denominator. Now looking at number 6, notice how the first term has a negative exponent on the variable a, which means this first term is not a monomial. A monomial cannot have a variable with a negative exponent, and therefore number 6 is also not a polynomial. I hope you found this helpful.